Futures Radio Show, sponsored by CME Group, the world's leading and most diverse futures and options exchange. CME Group's markets help individuals and businesses around the world effectively manage risk. For access to free educational tools and resources for the active individual trader, please visit activetrader.cmegroup.com.
Every day, traders and investors dive in to tackle the ever-changing markets to find opportunity. Futures Radio Show is your number one source for answers to the questions that all market participants want to ask. Veteran futures trader Anthony Crudele sits down with the most influential leaders and top traders in the industry. Now, here's your host, Anthony Crudele.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in for this episode with Stephen Goldstein. Remember, new shows are posted on Mondays and Thursdays. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes and YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a review on iTunes. Before I play today's interview for you, I want to give a shout out to the great sponsors of Futures Radio Show: CME Group, Trading Technologies, FTSE Russell, RJO Futures, and Top Step Trader. To learn more about these sponsors and the important things they are doing for futures traders, be sure to click on their logos on futuresradioshow.com. Today I spoke with trader and investor performance coach at Alpha R Cubed, Stephen Goldstein. We discussed his journey from trader to performance coach, some common things that traders need to work on, developing a mental edge, instincts, rules, guidelines, and last but not least, why it's so important for traders to unplug when they're not trading. So without further ado, let me take you right to the interview with Stephen. Stephen, thanks for joining me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Stephen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so these days I work as a coach, a performance coach with traders and investors and in trading businesses as well. So I predominantly work with investment banks, hedge funds, asset management firms, and some private individuals as well. And there's kind of two sides to my job: working with risk professionals and traders, and the other side where I actually coach leaders, managers, teams across organizations and businesses. Before that, I was a trader for almost 25 years. Started in the mid-'80s in London, working for a Japanese bank, and I had a career which took me to Credit Suisse, the investment bank in London, then Commerzbank, the German bank, and then finally the banking arm of American Express. Predominantly, I was a proprietary trader, but I was also involved in market-making roles, mostly in the fields of interest rates and foreign exchange.
So you started as a trader a while back, like you said, in the 80s, and have worked your way to now being a performance coach. I'm curious, because performance coaches right now are something that I think a lot of traders are looking into, and rightfully so. I think it's a necessity to have a performance coach or a mentor that helps you with increasing your performance. But back then, did you even imagine this is what you'd be doing? Did you even know about performance coaches back then?
No. I mean, my introduction to it was in the year 2000. And it was quite by accident. I was a trader at the time. We had a new manager joined our bank from Deutsche Bank, and he'd worked with this performance coach at Deutsche Bank, and he wanted to bring him in as a guinea pig into Commerzbank. And he said, "Steve, would you be, you seem the person most likely to work with this individual?" And if I'm honest, I was probably on a little bit of a downer as a trader at the time. My career had been, as it does, this job isn't a straight line job, and I was on one of those down cycles. But I actually rejected the opportunity to have it at the time, being a typical trader, very cynical of any outside help or interference, and that I can't do it on my own. But he twisted my arm, and I started working with his coach in London over a period of 6 months, and I came out of it the other side, and I enjoyed it. I wasn't sure it was like anything special at that time, but it had a huge impact after that. My performance just went up in a straight line almost, in so many different ways. And my trading was on a different level in the years after that. And he worked very much on my psychology, my mindset, my behaviors, my mental state, my self-awareness. And as I say, my career went on a big upward mode, my trading performance after that. And I returned to him. I mean, it went up, and actually, what bizarrely, I found myself out of work in 2009, partly as a result of the financial crisis, and partly as a result of circumstances. The bank that I worked for was taken over by another bank, and they closed down our business wholesale. And I actually was decided at that point I wanted to take what I was doing, which was working very well, to a hedge fund. And I knew this coach worked with a lot of guys in hedge funds, and could he introduce me to a few hedge fund managers. And he also, during our conversation, planted the seeds of the idea of me doing coaching myself, which I loved because I'd always enjoyed the behavioral side of trading. I'd read books on trading psychology and mental state for as long as I can remember. And I just fell in love with that idea, and I decided, hey, I'm going to become a performance coach. I'm going to train as that, and I'm going to trade for myself on the side. So I was going to keep my hand in trading my own money. And that's the direction I went. Although, to be honest, I ended up sort of dropping the trading because I just didn't have time to focus on both jobs after a while.
This became your new passion.
Yes. Yeah, it's something I love doing, and I thought I could do that whilst trading alongside of me. But I'm pretty full on when I trade, and it was very hard to do both things at the same time. And I decided that was the direction I wanted to go.
I want to go back to the time when you worked with your performance coach, and then you said that after working with your coach, that your performance, you noticed an immediate increase in your performance. What were some of the things that the coach helped you with?
I think it's quite hard to describe, but he allowed me to see myself as other people would see me. We so often get lost inside our own head, and we're always looking outwards. And however much we reflect, we don't really see how other people would view us. And through that process, he allowed me to gain this new perspective on me. And I can't tell you how powerful that is. And I always equate it to a sports professional who, be a pitcher or a batsman, where they get a chance to watch their performance with a coach, a performance coach, and to analyze it and to see how other people would see them, and then to get a handle on how they could change aspects of their game. So that's what he did for me. And then suddenly I'm working better with people. I'm more confident. I'm seeing opportunities. And instead of what I was seeing at that time was, I got into a mindset of seeing everything as a threat. And I'm starting to realize the parts of my game that were strong and that I could leverage, and the parts of my game where I was weak and perhaps needed to address. And that wasn't, that didn't happen in one go. That process happened over 2 or 3 years. And the fact that he was a catalyst for the start of that, and the ball just kept rolling and rolling from the end of that coaching onwards.
I love how you said it was a catalyst, because when I started to do self-assessment of myself, having better self-awareness, and that really comes from whether it's a mentor or a performance coach, just talking about how are you doing. I've said in the past on social media and in the show that if you have a mentor or a coach, they need to be asking you how you're doing, not just what you're doing in the markets or how you're doing in the markets. How are you actually doing? Because those moments are when you reflect on what you've been working on, what you've been doing. And that, like you said, that's the catalyst to you start working on yourself, identifying your strengths, identifying your weaknesses. What can I do more of? What should I be doing less of? Now, you emphasize that you're a performance coach, not a teacher. Talk to us
Yes.
about why you emphasize this so much.
Okay. So I think there's different levels of education in this role, in this job. And when you come into this, you're on a fast track. You're on this really steep learning curve. And that's when you meet your first teachers and mentors. And the job teaches you a lot. The people around you that you interact with teaches you a lot. The books you read, they teach you a lot. Um, and that to me is what we call basic education. Um, it's the sort of stuff that if you went to trading, you'd go to trading boot camp and you'd be taught all these things. And then you'd be mentored at the same time into how to use them and make them effective. And I always say to people, I don't work with people in the first 2, 3, 4 years sometimes as traders, because to me, they're in that early stage. They're learning the basics. They don't need to work with someone like me at that stage because, it's not right for them and they're not right for me. I have to work with people once they've got a few beatings and a few bruises. And, you know, on the other hand, they can see they've got something and they're starting to do something. That's when I start working with them. As we would say now these guys have made it to base camp, then I'm ready to start working with them. Although even then, my clients range from, it's not just about people at the beginning of their career, it's people all the way through their career. So I work with individuals 20, 30, in some cases even 40 years into their career because they find it useful to talk these things out. It's a constant learning curve, and either you're plateauing and going sideways and downwards, or you're getting back on the upward trend. So it's as a coach, you intervene and you catalyze something, but you're not teaching these. Not to say that there's not an element of suggestion about things that I will do, but it's people normally come to me that they know the basics and they know the rules.
Talk to us about the types of things that you coach.
Okay, well, I would not start off by saying, I'm going to coach you to do this or to do this. We have to start by knowing what the challenge is that they want. So it can vary in that, I'm starting at the moment with a group of traders in an investment bank, and I'm getting guidance from their managers, first of all, on what they think would be useful for them. And sometimes there might be guidance from colleagues involved as well on how do you think the coaching can help this person? And then I'll ask the person who I work with, how do you think coaching can help you? What are your needs? What are your challenges? And often we're not even clear at the first or second session what they are. So we're doing a lot of investigating because quite often the first problem that presents isn't actually the challenge. In other words, it's always evolving. But if we were to talk about certain situations, I can think of individuals who might be in a particular, they might be involved in a fund, and they may say, I'm doing okay, but I could do better, and I'd like to explore why. And then you explore why, and they start telling you some of the things that are happening in their world, what's distracting them. Maybe some of the other guys around them are doing better. It's often there's a relationship element in it. Somebody else is doing better than me, and that's throwing me off my process. Or I need to make money quickly, and that's throwing me off my process. In other words, they're fearing missing out. Then there may be their ego comes into it. Their ego's too present in their work. Maybe there's a misalignment between the way they're doing the job. So I will do psychometrics with people, and our psychometrics now we've used them for so many years. We get to know what type of person should be working in certain ways, and quite often they might be using methods or practices which aren't really suited to them, but maybe they learnt them in the first place, and so perhaps we're trying. I suppose we can get people to work in ways that are more constructive or more suited to how they are. There is so many things. I mean, I could give you 100 different things that we work on rather than one thing, but the ultimate goal is to get people performing more effectively, more productively, more optimally, ultimately making more money, making better decisions. Um, there's an end goal, but there's a process to get there.
Sure, because it's dependent on each individual person you're working with.
Yeah.
So let's just talk generally here. What is a common theme that you see that many traders need to work on?
Okay, so I'm trying to think. There are so many. I can think back to different ones. A misalignment of their of how they are, of really not knowing their strengths. See, I'm a big believer in that your strengths are the source code for how you work, and trying to find what they are and then leverage them is what makes you more effective. Now, obviously, you also want to work on your weaknesses, but you don't want to over focus on that. You want to find what your strengths are so they can minimize the weaknesses. And we do a lot in that space of working. I'm not saying that's for everyone. If I go back to myself, and I meet a lot of people that have the same challenges that I had, your confidence goes, or you've got too much self-doubt, or fear is elevated, and you start not seeing opportunities. So my coach worked with me to make me more self-aware. And then what came out of that was I became aware that, do you know what? I'm too negative sometimes. I'm great at, I became aware that I was very analytical, but I wasn't necessarily monetizing that analysis as well as I could. I often call it the performance gap. My performance gap was, hey, I was finding great ideas. Hey, I was really good at analyzing the market and finding an opportunity. But actually, I wasn't that good at monetizing it. And indirectly, the coaching gave me that. And then I worked on that myself. So I started working on how I was at managing risk. I was very good at finding risk, not so great at managing it and optimizing it. And that became a big thing for me. And that's where my performance started to improve. Now, I do the same quite often with people, where I don't always know how I've helped them. And I'll meet them sometimes years later, and they'll say to me, when we worked together, what you did really made an important, change in me, and I'm doing so much better in the years since. And I honestly don't actually know what it was that I did for them. I take them through a series of conversations. I ask them lots of questions. I challenge them on aspects of how they work. I'll bring the psychometrics to the table that get them a chance, allow them to see themselves, and we'll talk around those. But really, in the same sense that the coach did for me, I'm catalyzing something in them that I'm not even always aware of.
Hey everybody, I want to take a moment to thank one of our sponsors, FTSE Russell. They are a leading global provider of benchmarks, analytics, and data solutions. The Russell 2000 Index is a key benchmark for small cap U.S. stocks. Be sure to check out the E-mini Russell 2000 Index Futures, contract symbol RTY. For more information on FTSE Russell and their products, please visit FTSERussell.com. I love how you said that traders, a lot of them, don't even know their strengths, because I was one of those people. And this goes back to why I said earlier in our conversation that a mentor or a performance coach needs to ask, how are you? And I'm going to share a little story about really something that changed my career, because one of my mentors asked me, how are you doing, Anthony, on a regular basis? And I said, I'm doing fine. I always said I'm doing good. I feel good, even though I'm getting my butt kicked. I said, I feel pretty good about it. And he goes, Anthony, your greatest asset is that you heal quickly. And I was like, I didn't even really dawn on me that that was a strength I had. And to be honest with you, it really opened my eyes, and it helped me in so many ways. It helped me with confidence. It helped me with building my strategy. I can go on and do a whole show on just that question that he asked me, how are you doing? and I was always saying good, and how he told me that you have the ability to heal quickly and it is your greatest asset, how much that helped me in my career. And that really helped me develop my mental edge. I've said on social media, there are two types of edges. It's great to have both, but I think you definitely need to really hone in on which one is going to be the one you have more of and work on it. And that's mental and statistical edge. You and I aren't going to go in and talk about statistical edge today. This conversation's about developing mental edge. How do you help somebody develop mental edge?
Right. Okay. So first of all, the way you've stated that reminds me of that quote, and I think it's from the Gartman rules. There's two types of capital: mental, or was it physical and emotional? And of the two, emotional is far more expensive and far more harder to replace when you lose it. So yeah, it's you're absolutely right about that. Emotional capital, mental capital, psychological capital, they're all part of the same thing. Um, I'll come back to answer that question in a minute. I first want to come back to what you said, if that's okay, about your ability to heal,
Sure.
your ability to recover. That is one of the greatest gifts that you can have as a trader. And most people, as you say, don't realize they have it, and they don't realize how important it is. Now, I've got a psychological model which I use, which I don't share with my clients because it informs my work. It's from the field of psychology that I've studied and learnt. And I bring it in as a kind of mapping tool for when I'm working with people. But the most important part, or one of the most important parts of it, which I apply to trading, is the ability to let go and leave behind and refresh and then start again. And all the great traders I've ever met are brilliant at that. And yet no one focuses on that. And I call it the ability to walk away. And I often tell the story of to highlight this. And if you've ever listened to any of my podcasts over the years, there's this one trader who I bring into many of these podcasts, and he was a client of mine, worked for a bank in Hong Kong, and he was the most phenomenal trader, also a great poker player as well. He was actually ranked in the world's top 200 at the time, and he spoke about trading and poker synonymously all the time when I worked with him. And I once asked him, what makes you such a successful poker player? What is your real edge? And he said to me, look, Steve, I don't play the hands better than anyone else. I don't know the statistics better than anyone else. We all know that. We all know the rules. He said, what I do is I walk away better than anyone else. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? He said, look, imagine the hands. They're dealt randomly. They're pretty random when they're dealt. And you can get a good run of cards and have really good hands one night. And you can have really, really tough cards one night. And he said, if you have a run of tough cards, bad cards, he said, after a couple of hours, your mindset is going to get affected by that. And you're going to start playing the cards badly. And the people opposite you are going to see your hand going down and they'll start squeezing you. They're going to see your pile going down and they'll start squeezing you. And most people persist through that. They carry on. But for me, I know, no, I'm walking away before my head goes, before I go into tilt. So he just learned to walk away early, which means he kept, he lost less and won more. And I just thought, and he came back to the table the next day or the next week with a completely clear head. And that was his gift. And that's what made him such a great trader. And I see the same thing with so many traders when we talk about, because everyone has bad trades and bad periods, that ability to get over that. So what you said is an incredible gift. And I talk about that often. If I do one thing, I bring in a lot of stories when I coach people that from trading and from my experience as a coach that they can resonate with. So that's one thing. I've wrapped it on for a long time. But
no, that was great. that was excellent.
Yeah. The other thing was, how do I get people, to focus on their mental capital, their mental side, the emotional side? I think that is the big challenge, and stories, like I said there, that is a lot of it, and trying to get change is no amount of me giving people a rational explanation for why they should do something is going to change anyone. Otherwise, if people aren't rational, not in the sense that we understand the phrase, otherwise no one would drink, no one would smoke, we'd all live grey lives doing the same thing that's the best for us. People don't do that. And that's why when you try and get someone to change a behavior or habit by talking in a rational sense, the odds are incredibly low that they're going to change. But when you can engage them in an emotional sense, that is when they'll change. And I always use smoking as an example. If you tell someone not to smoke and you say, the reason you shouldn't smoke is, you're going to die, and, they'll go, yeah, not in the next few years. It's not going to happen till I'm 70 or 80. So they'll find an excuse to carry on smoking, because changing behaviors, changing habits are hard. If you can suddenly embrace that in a story, well, you're not going to see your grandchildren grow up. You're going to be, you're going to find it hard to breathe. Your house is going to smell of smoke. People are going to avoid you because you're not going to, everyone else at work is not smoking. Or if you say, look, you've got 2 years to live, basically, and you shock them, they're more likely to stop smoking. So you have to engage people in an emotional way. I use a lot of visioning. I use a lot of forward thinking. I do a lot of work with people. We call it empty chair work, or using figures and models that can get them to think outside the normal way they would think in their head, getting them to think outside the rational space and to look at what they do in an emotional sense. Getting people to realize that the numbers they see in front of them on the screen, that is not the market. But actually there are thousands, even millions of people behind those numbers on the screen. Try and envisage a whole world full of people, all with different ideas and views on the market, all doing different things for different reasons at different times. And then suddenly, you can start to get them to think that this is, emotionally. So,
Yeah, I mean, I
yeah,
can't agree with you more. I mean, that's why in my career, I really have had several mentors. Some I worked with specifically on technicals and fundamentals. We just talked markets. We never
yeah,
really talked about performance, or, like we've mentioned a lot today, how are you doing? And I had specific mentor for that, and you just didn't, you just don't know what's going to resonate with you, and what it's going to trigger. And going back to what you said, working with someone, helping them on the emotional side, that's what triggered for me. I mean, that's what helped me really build my strategy and really evolve as a trader. The technicals and the fundamentals for me, all the conversations I had with all the different traders, everything I've read, learned, thousands of hours on the screen, they are absolutely important. But without that other side, that mental edge for me, I would have never made it as a trader. Period. It doesn't matter how good I was at the charts. If I wasn't doing self-assessment and didn't have self-awareness, I just know I would not have made it. And I think
yeah,
that's just the way too many people look at getting so good or finding this perfect strategy, as that's the answer. It's part of the equation. It's part of it.
yeah. You need to be able to monetize it, and that's the human side. Everyone knows the technicals, everyone knows the fundamentals,
Yeah.
everyone has the same news. You have to be able to synthesize all that, whilst also managing your risk, monetizing value. It's an all-encompassing thing, and it's
Yes.
you doing it. It's bringing yourself to that. And I had a good career in trading, but I worked with some incredible traders, and watching them be able to do this, it was like poetry in motion sometimes. Some of these guys are just incredible, and it's an art. It's you know the fundamentals, the technicals. That's science, but trading is art. And that's the
Absolutely.
difference.
It really is a difference. And I also think for longevity in this business, I think that you can be really good at technicals or fundamentals, and that might make you some money that might last, I don't know how long, but you can probably return some results with that. But to have a career at this, to do this for a long period of time, the business is going to weigh on you. It's going to pull out every weakness that you have and ones you didn't know you had. and
Yeah.
and that's where I didn't see that early on. And like I said, I just keep going back to my mentor asking me, how are you doing? And then just building on my mental edge carried me through the years where even after I had success, dealing with success, sustaining success, and then, reverting back, not doing as well for periods of time. Mental edge was everything to me. I want to move on. I have a couple more questions I want to get to before we get to rapid fire.
Yep.
I have learned that in my career, I started off that writing down trading rules, like rules, not for my strategy. I think that a strategy has to have rules. That's what makes it what it is. We talked about statistical edge. You need to have trading rules tied to your strategy. But for my mental edge, for me as a trader, I felt that having trading rules on a piece of paper, all of these rules, I remember searching all of the greatest traders and what their rules were. It didn't work for me because in the heat of the moment, I'd never really had time to go look at that piece of paper, and I broke all of these rules, and it was just like, this doesn't work for me. I need to have instincts. So I developed instincts. I'm curious, how do you feel about that? Like having rules and instincts, where does that all sit with you?
Okay. So I always prefer the term guidelines rather than rules,
Okay.
because I think a lot of money is made on the edge in the grey areas, which is between black and white. And if you just have rules, you're either going to be black or you're going to be white. You're not going to be in
Yes.
that grey area. And that's where the money is. So it's almost like I always felt you have to learn how to do it. And then you kind of have to unlearn how to do it to succeed.
Yep.
You've got to learn where you can go off piste and where you can't. And that's almost the art. It's, you know, if I look back to my best ever trades, and I did have some phenomenal trades in my career, I'm glad to say, I couldn't necessarily put my finger, I probably broke my rules. You know, there was a structure there, but there was a point where you have to make an instinctive decision, where where you have to make that choice. And I think that's the same, even if you're creating a system and a quantitative way of doing it that removes the discretion, there's a point somewhere where you make an instinctive decision in the building of that process. You cannot remove the human element from it. And then I know people who have built systems and then changed it because of an instinctive feeling. You can't, and then they've made it work for them. So you can never remove that. But, I know my best trades and some of the trades that have saved me, where I decided not to do something, they were an instinctive gut feeling that I had that were probably the accumulation of experience, knowledge, listening to certain people, like you say, the mentors. And, we all, I'm a huge fan of mentors. I don't know a successful trader that hasn't had a series of mentors throughout their life, people that they look to and respect, and in some cases revere. Um, and I don't know how people do it without them. But yes, you have to hone an instinct at some point. My best ever trade, and it was something which I was working for about 4 months, and I was losing a lot of money on it, serious money. But I just felt it was right. It was based on a technical analysis view I had. And then one day some news came out, one day some data came out, one day some fundamental analysis came out, and the market wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. And it overlaid on the big technical view that I'd had. And I kind of went all in, not in one go, in a structured way, whilst I was sitting massively underwater. And I don't know why I did it, but it just felt right. And it became, by the end of that one day, I'd made a truckload of money. By the end of the next 2 weeks, it became my best ever trade. And it's almost impossible to actually put a finger on what happened in that moment. But that was 20 years of experience by then. And that is incredibly hard to do. At some point, instinct has to play a role.
I couldn't agree more with you. I think it's so important and something else that is also overlooked by a lot of traders. Last question before we get into rapid fire. Time away from the screens, unplugging. I think this has been huge for me, and I think that many traders need to unplug more. I see so many people out there basically tweeting that they've been at their screens for days on end, and I just sit there and think back to myself doing that early in my career, and I think that at that point it made sense for me to be able to do it. But going back to developing mental edge and having longevity, if you don't start learning how to unplug, this business will consume you. It'll overwhelm you. And for my own personal experience, stress got to me, had a heart attack at my trading screen at 36. And because I was not unplugging, I was not unplugging.
Yeah.
So I emphasize to all traders, you could be young and strong and mentally strong and be able to, and to do that. And you're committed to it and you want to learn, but at some point you need to learn to unplug. So Stephen, what are some things that you recommend for traders to do when they're away from their screens, to help them developing their mental edge?
Yeah, we're definitely resting the mind. The mind is like a muscle, and the more you're using it, the less efficient it becomes. So if you can imagine, you've got a dumbbell in your arm and you're just holding it, that's fine. Maybe it's not a heavy one, but after a couple of hours, that light dumbbell becomes incredibly heavy, and your arm starts falling down. Now that's the same analogy with the mind. Now the mind doesn't stop working, but it stops working in ways that are efficient, and it becomes inefficient. And that's when your willpower goes. And that's when your ability to control yourself goes.
Yep.
So when you walk in at the start of the day at 8 o'clock and you've got this plan for the day and this structure, and you've been looking at the charts, whether it's a market profile, whether you've been using candles, and you've created a structure for the day, or whether you've created some sort of fundamental story and, you've wrapped a few trade ideas around it. And at the beginning of the day, most people trade that pretty well, but they sit there all day long. By the afternoon, their brain is frazzled, and their ability to stick to plans, to stay within their rules, to avoid reacting in a negative way, it gets blown out the water. And there was a period in my life when I was trading actively, day trading at a bank, and I would be trading the European interest rate futures in the morning. The Bund, well, this is how long ago it was. Euro marks at the time, you'd call it Euribor now. Euro marks, BTP, the Italian bond. All these different markets that traded on Life in the morning in London. I'd be actively trading them, bang, 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 and I'd usually do pretty well in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I'd move over to the US markets, T notes, T bonds, US futures, and I never did well in those. And I used to think it's because I didn't do well in the dollar markets compared to the European. Maybe I just wasn't a very good dollar trader, but they're virtually the same products, same economies, same factors driving them pretty much. Now, later on in my career, I moved to more of a longer term style rather than day trading. And do you know what? Suddenly I'm as good on euros, good as US dollar futures and US dollar products as I was on the European, because I'm not trading like mad throughout the day. I'm taking longer term views, and I'm taking breaks in the day. I'm going down to the gym or for a run about 10, 11 o'clock. Sometimes I'd run 6 miles at lunchtime around Hyde Park a couple of times, or by the Thames. And, it completely clears your head. You don't have time when you're doing that to think about the markets. So I was suddenly coming back fresh in the afternoon. It makes a huge difference. You have to think of your brain like a muscle. It gets tired, it gets frazzled, it doesn't stop working, it just works a lot less effectively after too many hours without a break or pause, without some sort of good refreshment or good nourishment.
And fantastic advice, Stephen. Loving this conversation. We are not done yet. I have rapid fire segment questions next if you're ready for those.
Yep.
All right, everybody. Our
Fire
rapid
away.
fire segment is sponsored by Trading Technologies. Trade the global markets with TT. They are the world's fastest commercially available futures trading platform. Now with integrated tools for advanced options trading, cryptocurrencies, and trade surveillance. You can try it now for free at tryttnow.com. Stephen, first question for you. What trader has influenced your life the most and why?
Oof. Oof. That's difficult. That's a great. I've met so many ones. Um, do you know what? I read the Market Wizards books over and over and over again. And you wouldn't call him a trader because he's the author, but Jack Schwager had a huge influence on me simply because of, those amazing interviews and reading them time and time again. And if I was to pinpoint one interview, it would be the Ed Seykota one. I just kept going over and over that interview time and time again. And in a way, that mentored me.
What was one of the hardest things for you to overcome in trading?
Ego every time. It is so hard. It kills so many traders, and it killed me at time. Leaving it at the door is so difficult as you walk in the office. And then if you can't divorce yourself from the ego, but killed my trading on many occasions.
How has your trading process evolved over the years?
Like I said before, I moved from more of a short-term stance to a longer-term stance. Again, in the early days, I was involved more in cross-product arbitrage, so of playing different products against each other. Then I moved to more of a proprietary stance, trading interest rates. And later in my career, more of a proprietary stance, trading longer-term views, but only capturing short parts of the move. So I might have a view for many months, but I'm just trying to capture a small part of it, the fast part. I'm not someone who sits there with risk on for months on end.
What is one attribute that you believe every trader should have?
The ability to say they don't know, the ability to say they were wrong. That's an ego suppressing ability, but if you can just say that, I don't know what's happening next, I was wrong, I got that wrong, move on, next thing. Probabilistic thinking as well. If you can think probabilistically, huge benefit.
Favorite book about trading?
I've already named it. Market Wizards. I could also add in, I've just read Gregory Simon's book about Jim Simons, and that's very rapidly moved up there. I finished that last week. It's only just come out. But the Market Wizards reminiscences, those classics.
If you had to pick a profession other than trading and performance coach, what would it be?
Psychologist. I love psychology. I love what drives people, human mind.
What's the best piece of advice that you received about trading?
Well, it's best advice. I used to I came across a Babe Ruth quote once. Never let fear of striking out keep you from playing the game. And I used to write that on every single screen that I ever traded with. And I don't know if anyone gave me that advice or I've just came across that, but that was it for me. And, that spoke massively to me.
If you could go back in time and give the younger you a piece of advice, what would it be?
Don't give a damn what anyone else thinks. Be your own person.
If you had an elevator pitch me your edge in trading, what would you say?
Well, actually, I'll take it from what a former manager said to me. One of my occasions when I was beating myself up. He said, Steve, I don't get why you keep beating yourself up. You're like an alchemist. You make money from nothing. And that stood with me. And that was what I did. It was, and the belief in your ability to do that was my edge.
Last question for today. Favorite thing to do when you're not trading and being a performance coach?
Well, I go to football a lot. You guys call it soccer. And I've been going for 50 years to watch my beloved Arsenal here in London. Other than that, really time out with family, friends, out with my daughters. And I love walking. I love going out with my wife. We go for long walks. We don't really have mountains here, but we go into the hills and we do, we love walking. So a mixture of those three.
Stephen, where can people find you on Twitter, and give us a website to check out?
Okay, so I'm on Twitter. AlphaMind101 is my handle. My website, we've got alpha-mind.net, which is really for this new Alpha Mind project, which is really the podcast and a program that I've been developing with my co-host. My business website for the coaching is alpharcubed.com. That's alpha, the letter R, and the word cubed.com.
Besides the website, where else can people go to listen to your podcast?
It's available on iTunes. It's called the Alpha Mind Podcast. It's available on Spotify. Buzzsprout is the homepage. And, sort of any good podcast site. And hopefully we'll have you on it in the new year one day.
I'm coming on. Looking forward to it. Everybody go and check out the podcast. It's very, very good. Stephen, what can I say? I just loved our conversation today. Thank you so much for joining me on Futures Radio Show.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and an honor indeed. And great work you're doing. Love your show.
Thank you for listening to Futures Radio Show. If you have any questions or comments for myself or my guests, please visit futuresradioshow.com and sign up to be a premium member for free. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes.